when it comes to Power Rangers and Super Sentai, the overarching story for the whole season is changed. Because many times plot lines wouldn't work in an American show in general, or it's too violent, so it can't be used in the same age rating bracket. This happens actually quite a lot. Like MMPR and Zyuranger storyline are completely different. Now, one of the seasons that I really love, Ninja Storm and Hurricangers. Now, some differences are better than others. Let me do a refresh on Ninja Storm's plot. Lothar, which we originally thought he was an alien from outer space, wanted to go after Sensei Konoi and his Wind Ninja Academy. Basically vacuumed up the school, captured his students, and Lothar turned him into a guinea pig, and his ultimate goal was to take over the planet as an act of revenge. We didn't really know anything about it until we found out when Cam went back in time. What was the story in Hurricanger? Completely different. The only elements that were retained from the original story, we had two different schools, the Hayate school and the Akatsuchi school. Now, what were the villains in Hurricanger's storyline? Well, they were not aliens, they were simply monsters led by the great Talzent. Now, their primary goal was to find this great power. They didn't know really where it was, but they knew that if you did certain things, they would appear. It's kind of a copy of the Lights of Orion arc. So the ultimate goal was to find this great power and take over the planet, and they would do it any which way possible. Yes, they destroyed the Hayate school. That's why the Hurricangers were the ones who went after Talzant first, and the Go Rangers eventually went after him later. One annoying story directions change due to age ratings. Ninja Storm didn't kill off the Wind Thunder students, while Hurricanger did. That's why they have no point to the plot. I wish the writers gave Lothar a reason to keep them alive, because there's a disconnect from his actions in the pilot to what happened in Samurai's journey. Now, the Thunder Rangers and the Go Rangers. Now, we know in Ninja Storm, the Thunder Rangers came out of nowhere and they were fighting the Rangers. As the story progressed, we also found out that Lothar promised them. For the Go Rangers case, the reason why they were fighting the Hurricanegers is because, again, that prophecy that it was telling them for this great power, they must do something. And for one of the prophecies that were given out was to fight the Hurricanegers in order to unlock this power ability, and Talzant was also using them. In Ninja Storm, Blake and Hunter eventually became friends fairly quickly. Compared to in Hurricanger, they were much more harder to convince to join, to work together with the Hayate school, because they had their own personal goals and wants to use this power for. But a combination of them being tricked by Talzant and this want for that ultimate power. One of the prophecies says you have to fight a warrior on a warrior, and was to kill one of the Go Rangers. After all this, and Hurricane Red was, he went through a lot of hardship to convince the Go Rangers to join them, to the point where he was willing to die for them, because it was a really bad arc in the story where things were on the line that Ninja Storm did not want to adapt. It was very awkward when Ninja Storm had to get around the footage. Do you remember the Collar episode? That was actually going to blow them up. That was the defining episode where the teams finally worked together. But in Ninja Storm, they started working together much more earlier on. Now, the big change that Ninja Storm did, and it's kind of the opposite of what happened with Sam in SPD. I don't want to spoil the main story if you haven't seen Hurricanger, but at Shurikenger, he was a bodyguard for a very important character. And when the situation was getting worse with Talzant, he had to intervene in order to stop the Hurricanger and Go Rangers from being killed. He's kind of a pompous ass. We do get backstory on where he came from, but the main thing that kind of devalued the character, he couldn't be known by anyone. What they did in the show is that he was able to mask his entire physical appearance as past Rangers from the other shows. But because Shurikenger really didn't have a character that we could know, especially when we found out the truth of what was going on at the last minute, it robbed him of being an actual character on the show. Obviously, everyone knows Cam's backstory is completely different. He was a part of the show from the very beginning. In fact, he's actually a combination of two characters from Hurricanger. Shurikenger, like I said, but Ouroboros. She was the one who made all the technical gadgets and ran the computer system. All those elements were combined together to give him his own backstory. So while Shurikenger hid in the shadows, Cam was always the forefront. He had his father to deal with, so we had that conundrum. He wanted to be a ranger, but his father didn't want him to become one, so that's the reason why he always had that resentment. Then he made Cyber Cam, and then eventually when Cam went back in time and found out the truth about his mother and what happened with Lothor and that ultimate secret, there's a lot of depth that was given to Cam and linking it to the entire story. Expanded on it greatly to the point where they actually had to film a lot of original stuff in order for Cam to come in, because like I said, Shurikenger was a side character. He was there really as just help at the last minute. Now the big group, Lothor and the villains. They expanded on all the backstories and stuff and linking Lothor with Sensei Kanoi and Cam. All that dynamic did not exist in the original story with Talzant. Talzant was just your kind of basic, generic villain, more basic than even Scorpius, because Talzant, you know, I liked his design. He was cool, kind of bug-like, so that's where the Lothor logo came from. He was ultimately just a statue. He was an animatronic, and he had a really cool voice, but he couldn't really do anything, so that's why he relied on the Seven. Now, Mara and Capri, they are not obviously family in Hurricaneger. They are subordinates just like everyone else. The way they handled all the generals in Ninja Storm was very bad, with the exception of Vexicus, because they didn't treat them as jokes or weird accidents that happened, like Motor Drone in Ninja Storm. I didn't like Mara and Capri. They were just idiots. And Fabrijo and Wendigo, they were serious funny, plus in Wendigo's case, sexy funny. You liked them more than what Mara and Capri did because they were just bumbling idiots. You hated them in that regard. The rest of the villain characters on Hurricaneger were handled much better. That's the main reason why Chubo in Ninja Storm is this weird idiot that no one listens to, screws up all the time, but then all of a sudden in the arc where a hunter got corrupted by the gas, and like Chubo changed his personality completely. He was competent. He was serious. Think of like what happened with Elgar in Turbo versus his Japanese counterpart. And what was more dumb in Ninja Storm, in Hurricaneger's case, a lot of them just eventually got killed off after each other, and they would introduce a new general. In Ninja Storm's case, they didn't really want to do that, so that's the main reason why Chubo kind of just gets lost. Zergain, he suffered, I would argue, the most of all the characters. Now, he's very similar to his Japanese counterpart, and in fact, Chubo and Zergain share their same names between the two shows. There was a couple of things they did remove from him. Zergain actually was a robotic suit for a very small alien in his head, so that's probably where the joke came from on Ninja Storm. Zergain eventually devolved into the exact same problem as Lord Zed, while Zergain, but he was still a formidable enemy up right until the end of the show. As for Motodrome, was always there, like I said, in Hurricaneger. But Motodrome, he was made in an accident. What was really annoying, Motodrome's Japanese character, sinister as hell, had no funniness about him. I would describe him as Zenaku from Wild Force, where he was that serious and that corrupt of evil to want to kill the Wild Force Ranger off. Same thing from him. That's the element they lost. They turned him into a joke, and it was just like, why did you do it? Shimatsu, he was another one of those in Ninja Storm that was kind of ruined. He was a crazy character in the original Hurricaneger episode. He was deadly at the same time. Well, Shimatsu, he was created by accident from, hitting his mask with magic. Then all of a sudden he's just this dumb idiot that just waste and throw him to the side. Vexicus and his Japanese counterpart were both equally good. And I would even argue Vexicus was probably better in some areas, not all. I think Vexicus was far more conniving because he would do some horrific things. He would work in the shadows where all the other generals would be, trying to fight the Rangers. He would plan ahead and do stuff, and then when one of the generals would fail, he'd come in, take advantage of that, and the Rangers would get screwed. Now, Vexicus is very similar to him, except in Ninja Storm's case, he came from outer space, and he was looking for the Battleizer. Now, the Battleizer did not exist in Hurricaneger at all. And I love that story, and that's the reason why I love Vexicus too. And he was one of the few characters that, in order to stop him, Thunder Rangers basically had to sacrifice their Zords. I would just wish that was handled better with the other characters, because Lothor's entourage was really the main suffering bit of the villain's side. Now, for the final fight and the final goal of Lothor, obviously, Lothor's case, he wanted his revenge on Kanoi. He wanted his revenge on Cam. He wanted to end and get rid of all the people from the Wind Ninja Academy, wiped them out, and that was their final fight. They had no more Zords, no more nothing, and he was going to do anything in his power to get back at his nephew and his brother. And that's why he perverted and stole Cam's Samurai Morpher. And this is an excellent example of how Power Rangers worked around the limitations of the Sentai footage. Shurikenger dies in Hurricaneger, and that's the reason why Cam was unable to be used in the finale episodes. But he was still part of the forefront of the story. He didn't get lost. But also, it was a way to showcase Power Rangers losing. And, Lothor stole someone's Morpher and used it against everyone in some horrific way, was able to use its power to revive all the freaking enemies that they fought throughout the entire season. Now, Hurricanegers was vastly different. Like I said, Talzant is not linked in any way, any character in Hurricaneger in that way. We have to live or die trying to top Talzant because he found the ultimate power. It was a more emotional finale. There were some things here and there I didn't like. The way Ninja Storm restored Sensei Kanoi back to normal, it was the interaction and final fight with Lothor. In Hurricaneger's case, oh yeah, by the way, we have to revert the guinea pig back into a normal person, and he was protecting Oboro. But the reason why the whole guinea pig / hamster thing happened in Hurricaneger, it was simply because their sensei forgot how the spell worked, and only when his daughter, Oboro, was in trouble, he remembered it, and then he turned back to normal. Even though Ninja Storm had a rocky start, because it did that whole what's a Power Ranger, and they were kind of doing this soft reboot, all because they went to New Zealand. But at least they course corrected away from that very quickly, and we're like, no, Power Rangers always existed. This is just a new team. It's just a new way, but it's the same thing that we've always enjoyed. Hurricanegers was a hard season to adapt. Think of like Kamen Rider Kiva versus Kamen Rider Forze. That's like the dynamics we had between Ninja Storm and Hurricaneger. Which one is actually better? I think the main plot line, the Lothor getting his revenge on the Wind Ninja Academy, his brother and his nephew, that was much more interesting and developed than the Hurricaneger one. Even though I liked the mystery of who's this great power, what's this great power, we didn't know what it was. Was it going to be another Lights of Orion thing? Was it going to be some sort of ancient person? But because the villains were just looking for this, inanimate object, it was weak because of the lack of intimacy to the characters. The schools, they are basically the same with very little difference. I would honestly go to the Hayate Nakatsuki school. The characters, when we did see them, their backstories, their personal backstories with the senseis, that worked much more better than the way Ninja Storm did, because they were kind of an afterthought. They were thrown into these balls, and then that was it. Even till the end of the season, you almost forget they captured the students, and you're like, oh yeah, you're right. They have to go rescue these energy balls with the people in them, and that's where the Dragon Force vehicle comes out of nowhere from. Yeah, it has to definitely go to the Hurricaneger side. The Thunder Rangers versus the Ghoul Rangers. Now, this is probably a no-brainer. It's going to go to the Ghoul Rangers, and that's the main fault of Hunter. Like I said, Blake, good character. I liked his journey through the show. Hunter, he couldn't do really much. You know why? Because of what they were doing in Hurricaneger. A lot of that storyline could not be adapted. He's a prime example of, well, if we can't adapt the material from the Sentai side, that character just gets binned. The Ghoul Rangers were far more dramatic. It was much more hard to convince them to join. So yeah, the Ghoul Rangers win out on this. Cam versus Shurikenger, same thing. Cam wins. solely because he has a true backstory that we followed through the entire season versus, oh, we're in episode 47 and Shurikenger's dying and he finally spills his beans of where he was from, who he was from, how he knew certain things, and what was going on behind the scenes. And the thing that pissed me off the most was that even in his deathbed, we never saw who he was. Why? Cam had a much better arc than Shurikenger. Lothor and the villains. This is kind of split. Lothor's side, when he's not stupid, great arc, great journey, and the way he screwed Cam and then got screwed back by everyone else, trapped inside the Sea of Abyss, that was a great ending to the character. But Talzant, even though Talzant is weak, the other generals that he commanded were far more interesting, far more deadly. Talzant's side wins out. As for the final fight, that's going to go to Ninja Storm. The concept of the Abyss and his ability to resurrect all the monsters and minions and generals from back to life to fight the Rangers and try to get them at that last moment was an amazing thing to see. And it's so rare for Power Rangers to ever do something to this scale. The fight and the personal closure to the Ninja Storm Rangers, because it was important to the Ninja Storm Rangers. Remember how Tori, Dustin, and Shane started out in the series? They were these idiots. They didn't know what they were doing. They were screwing up in school, screwing up in work. They were not able to focus on one thing. They were splitting themselves up, lying to their sensei. They were unreliable, and they were going to be kicked out of the Win Ninja Academy. So it was a personal journey going from that. I don't give a crap that I have no more powers. Those abilities, fighting styles will not be taken away from them. And that's what stopped Lothor. That was an amazing moment when they did that. And you know it's an amazing moment because a lot of the other seasons like Dino Thunder repeated that. Ninja Storm, you were much more closer to Shane, Tori, and Dustin than the trio in Hurricangers. You know, if you're a Power Ranger fan, you could totally stick to Power Rangers, and if you're a Sentai fan, you could do the same exact thing. You don't have to watch either show if you prefer one or the other. I think why they work so well is because they universally share things in common that both America and Japan love. You know, there's certain seasons of Sentai that common people who never really watch anime, manga, you know, stuff from Japan, it'll confuse them. It'll be very difficult to follow, and it could potentially put them off. Hurricanger? No, that's not in there. Everything you can understand, enjoy, find thrilling, and even Ninja Storm. There's a lot of things, even though it has its goofy sides, which I hate, when you watch all the other stuff that goes underneath that, for a season that had to scrap everything from California to go to New Zealand, new writers, new producers, it was a damn near perfect first try right out of the gate. So I always suggest, and when someone asks me, what Sentai should I start with? Hurricanger is a perfect choice for that. But this is what I think about these seasons. What are your takes on Ninja Storm or Hurricanger if you've seen them? Which side did you like more? Ninja Storms or Hurricangers? If you have a suggestion or a topic you'd like me to cover in a video, leave a comment down below and I may pick it for next time.